There are secrets in television archives that were never meant to be found. For 50 years, one of those secrets belonged to Benny Hill.
You know what you are?
No!
You are supercalifragilisticexpialidocious!
His show was a titan of comedy, seen and loved across the planet, until it was suddenly ripped from the airwaves.
The increasing scrutiny from media watchdog groups and the changing landscape of television standards caused advertisers to shy away from associating their brands with The Benny Hill Show.
Everyone accepted the simple explanation, but the truth was hidden in plain sight, on a reel of film locked away. Now, an AI has cracked the vault. It has uncovered the legendary lost scene, and the reason it was banned reveals that Benny Hill didn't just cross a line, he challenged powers that made sure he would never work again. Inventing television's biggest hit. Before he was a global icon, Alfred Hawthorne Hill was just a kid from Southampton, England. Born in the mid-1920s, his early life was anything but glamorous. He worked as a milkman, drove cars, and even played the drums. But show business was in his blood. His grandfather had been a circus clown, and young Alfred inherited that itch to perform. These odd jobs, however, taught him something crucial: how to watch people. He studied the little quirks and funny habits of everyday life, building a mental library of humor that would one day make him a fortune. The Second World War changed everything. As a mechanic and searchlight operator, he saw the world at its darkest. But it was his time in the Combined Services Entertainment section, performing for exhausted soldiers, where he found his true calling. He learned that laughter wasn't just a distraction, it was a lifeline. After the war, he dove headfirst into comedy, inspired by British music hall legends and his American hero, the radio host Jack Benny. He loved Jack's timing so much that he took his first name, and Benny Hill was born. In 1955, The Benny Hill Show premiered on the BBC, and it was an instant game changer. While other shows relied on clever wordplay, Benny's comedy was visual, fast, and universal. He blended old-school slapstick with modern television speed, creating a variety show packed with goofy characters, song parodies, and wild physical gags. When the show moved to Thames Television in 1969, it exploded. The budget grew, the sketches got bigger, and Benny Hill became a global phenomenon. By the 1970s, his show was broadcast in over 140 countries. His humor needed no translation. Whether you were in London, Los Angeles, or Sydney, the sight of Benny being chased by a group of angry nurses to the frantic tune of yakety sax was hilarious. That closing chase scene became his trademark, an iconic piece of pop culture so powerful that the song is still known today simply as the Benny Hill theme. He created a cast of unforgettable characters, like the bumbling Fred Scuttle and the little bald man Jackie Wright, who became Benny's favorite comedic punching bag. At its peak in 1971, the show drew over 21 million viewers in the UK alone, one of the most watched programs in British history. Benny Hill wasn't just a comedian, he was the undisputed king of television. But behind the laughter, a storm was gathering, and a single reel of tape would become its lightning rod. How the world turned on Benny. By the 1980s, the world was changing, but Benny Hill's comedy wasn't. His formula of cheeky jokes and scantily clad women, known as Hill's Angels, had been a smash hit for years. But a new generation of comedians was emerging in Britain, and they weren't telling silly jokes, they were angry, political, and sharp. This alternative comedy movement, led by figures like Ben Elton, saw Benny's work not as harmless fun, but as outdated and offensive. Elton, in particular, took aim at Benny Hill, publicly accusing his show of promoting a culture that treated women as objects. To put it mildly, his comments were explosive. Suddenly, the conversation around the Benny Hill Show shifted. Critics who had once praised his comedic genius now called him a relic. Newspapers and feminist groups joined the chorus, arguing that his brand of humor had no place in a modern world. For years, fans had brushed off these criticisms, but now they were impossible to ignore. The tide was turning against him in his own country. What many overlook is that this wasn't just a cultural battle, it was also a financial one. Each episode of The Benny Hill Show cost a staggering £450,000 to produce. That's about $1.4 million in today's money. The elaborate sets, musical numbers, and large cast made it one of the most expensive shows on television. For 20 years, Thames Television had happily paid the price because the show was a global cash cow. But with ratings beginning to slip at home and the constant public backlash growing louder, the network started to get nervous. The show was becoming a very expensive headache. Benny's defenders argued that he was just an old-fashioned entertainer, more of a relic than a threat, but the pressure was mounting. The Broadcasting Standards Council, a regulatory body, was making it clear that the kind of content Benny was famous for was now under intense scrutiny. The network was caught between a global audience that still loved him and a home audience that was increasingly turning against him. They needed the show to evolve, to become safer and less controversial. The network gave him one last chance to adapt, but Benny had a different idea, a sketch he thought was his most brilliant and daring yet. Capturing a career-ending moment. In late 1988, during the production of what would become his final season, Benny Hill gathered his cast to film a new sketch. On the surface, it was classic Benny Hill, a grand, chaotic parody of a beauty pageant. But this one was different. It wasn't just about silly walks and goofy answers. According to whispers from crew members who were there that day, Benny had decided to push the envelope further than ever before. He wasn't just making fun of pageants, he was targeting one of the most powerful and untouchable figures in Britain at the time, Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. The scene, which was never given an official title, became known on set as the Iron Maiden. Benny, dressed in a ridiculously over-the-top gown and a towering blonde wig, played a character that was an unmistakable, vicious caricature of the Prime Minister. The jokes weren't just cheeky, they were deeply personal and politically charged. The sketch depicted the Iron Maiden character in a series of humiliating situations, mixing his trademark risque humor with brutal political satire. The punchline, which has never been fully revealed, was said to be so shocking that an audible gasp went through the studio audience during the taping. You see, the atmosphere on set was tense. The cast was nervous. While they trusted Benny's comedic instincts, they knew this was dangerous territory. Parodying politicians was one thing, but this felt like a declaration of war. After the taping, the director and producers were visibly shaken. They knew immediately that they had a massive problem on their hands. The tape was rushed to the executives at Thames Television. A private screening was held for a handful of the network's most powerful decision-makers. The reaction was not laughter, it was pure panic. The real kicker is, their fear wasn't about public offense or sexism, it was about raw political power. Margaret Thatcher was one of the most formidable leaders in the world, and they had just filmed a sketch that portrayed her in a way that could only be described as a character assassination. They envisioned legal battles, government backlash, and financial ruin. An executive reportedly slammed his fist on the table and ordered the tape to be locked away immediately. He declared that it must never, under any circumstances, be aired or even spoken of again. The official reason for the show's cancellation in 1989 was declining ratings and high costs. But the truth was locked in that vault. The show wasn't canceled, it was silenced. The tape was buried deep in the Thames Television archives, forgotten by everyone except a handful of terrified executives. When a computer found the forbidden tape, for over 35 years, the story of the Iron Maiden sketch was nothing more than a myth, a ghost story whispered among television historians. The physical tape was logged under a deliberately misleading code name and buried among thousands of other reels in a climate-controlled archive. As Thames Television was bought and sold over the years, the secret was buried deeper and deeper. It seemed destined to remain a mystery forever, but they never accounted for the future. Now get this, in 2025, a massive project was launched to digitize the entire Thames archive before the old tapes degraded completely. To handle this colossal task, they didn't use human archivists. They used a sophisticated new artificial intelligence, an AI designed to scan, analyze, and categorize every single frame of footage. This AI wasn't just reading labels, it was watching everything. It used facial recognition to identify actors, analyzed audio for keywords, and cross-referenced production notes and camera logs to create a perfect digital record. For months, the AI worked silently, processing millions of hours of television history. Then it found an anomaly. It was a reel of tape with conflicting data. The label said it was B-roll footage from a travel documentary, but the AI's analysis showed something completely different. It recognized the faces of Benny Hill, Henry McGee, and the Hills Angels. It identified the set from the final season. But the content didn't match any aired episode. The AI flagged it for review, noting a high probability of being unaired, sensitive material. The AI's report was chillingly clinical. It described the scene in perfect detail, confirming the decades-old rumors. It transcribed the dialogue, including the punchline that had sent a wave of panic through the network. But it did something else, something no human archivist would have. It cross-referenced the vicious caricature Benny was playing with news footage from the 1980s and confirmed with 99.9% certainty that the target was indeed Margaret Thatcher. The banned scene was real. The AI had found the smoking gun. It proved the official story of the show's cancellation was a deliberate cover-up. The problem wasn't that Benny Hill was sexist. The problem was that he had taken on one of the most powerful people on the planet. But the AI didn't just find the tape, it unknowingly leaked a single, haunting frame from the scene during a data transfer anomaly, piecing together the final puzzle. So that single leaked frame changed everything. It spread across the internet like wildfire, and the story we've all been told for over 3 decades began to fall apart. Did Benny Hill's career really end overnight because a few new comedians thought he was old-fashioned? Or was he deliberately taken out by a system that he had dared to challenge? It feels like we're finally getting to the truth, but this discovery raises more questions than it answers. Think about it. The story that Ben Elton in the alternative comedy scene ended Benny's career now looks like a perfect cover story. It was convenient. It gave the public a simple, believable reason for the show's disappearance, all while the real reason was locked away in a vault. It deflected from the truth that a major television network caved to political pressure, real or imagined, and buried one of its biggest stars to protect itself. But what details are we still missing? We have a single frame and an AI's report. The full video remains under lock and key even after its discovery. What else happened in that sketch? Was the punchline truly as career-ending as the executives believed? And how did they keep everyone who was there that day silent for so long? Crew members, audience members, the cast, they all saw it. Were they paid off? Did they sign non-disclosure agreements with terrifying penalties? And what about Benny himself? He died just a few years later in 1992, a man who lived a strangely simple life despite his immense wealth. Did he know the real reason he was taken off the air? Did he understand that he had crossed a fatal line? Or did he die believing the official story that the world had just moved on? The discovery of this tape recast his final years in a tragic new light, not as a faded star, but as a silenced artist. We now know what was on the tape, but we still don't fully understand the why or the who. Who made the final call? How high up did the decision go? The truth is finally starting to emerge, but it paints a much darker picture of television than anyone ever imagined. For 35 years, Benny Hill was remembered as a comedy dinosaur, a casualty of changing times whose jokes simply didn't land anymore. But the AI's discovery proves that's a lie. He wasn't just a comedian who fell out of fashion. He was a global powerhouse who dared to mock the powerful and was silenced for it. The controversy over Hills Angels and the so-called sexist sketches was the smokescreen. The real story was about a single band scene, a formidable political enemy, and a corporate cover-up that lasted for decades. A secret that could only be uncovered by a ghost in the machine. Was Benny Hill a casualty of culture or the victim of a conspiracy? Hit like and subscribe if you want more secrets revealed.